I don't think you've always looked at it like, oh, of course my art's good and people are going to want to see and everything else. But for me, it's like, of course I'm interesting. How could someone not want to listen to me? So it's just this really strange place that we both come from. And I know that I'm constantly, anything you make, I'm probably beyond maybe your kids or your wife, or your mom. I'll definitely, maybe give the title to Patty there. One of the biggest fans of whatever it is you make. Like, no matter what you make, I'm like, it's for the company. We should put it on the website. Like, whatever it is, it's almost like our website is a refrigerator in our commercial endeavors, and I'm willing to put anything you bring home onto the website.
Yeah, and it's something that is both. It's something that I'm grateful for, but it's also unsettling because, the objectivity of it, if there is such a thing in what I do, doesn't matter to anybody. Like, to the point that anything I've ever made as a kid, I made all kinds of stuff for people, but I always gave it away. And it was actually not because it was, just me being a fool, although at a certain age, I'm drawing caricatures of my friends and giving it to them, and they're hanging it up in their room, and I thought that was the coolest thing in the world. But it's more like the act of practicing being generous in giving that allows me to actually get into a space where I can, come up with ideas. Otherwise, I don't, if to your point of the very nihilistic, like, what's the point of anything? If you fall into that trap in my role, then you're in some serious trouble, and it's hard to climb back out of that.
Do you have to manufacture the point? Like, how? I would imagine that a frightening and exhilarating space is the white space, in that there's nothing. Maybe not only the white, but the void. Not even white space, because you don't even have the size of the canvas on which you are going to work. So there are times creatively when you are very likely starting with the void. And it's almost like a Big Bang moment where something must come from nothing, which, of course, how does something come from nothing? There must be something there. What is that? What is staring into that void like? And how do you have to? Is it like energy to matter conversion? Are you applying energy to create? Right? Where, I mean, that's kind of what you do. Wow, look at that! Look what just happened. You take energy in the form of your effort and your mind, and you convert it into an idea, which is matter. You're an energy to matter conversion engine.
Yeah, I guess that's an interesting.
I love how you don't know what to do with that.
No, I think I do. I I think that a creative journey like that is, it depends on what level you're at in your ability to create. So I see it like when you first start in a realm related to art, whatever that is, you have your skill building level. And the skill building is practicing the piano, or, in my case, getting trained to use design software, or learning music, and once you're past skill building, you have to start thinking about yourself as a person that sees the world through the level of skill that it took to get there. And in that way, you sort of move into curation of things you like, things that inspire you. So there might be in the same as playing the piano, there might be a composer or a musician that you really admire, and then that brings you to the imitation phase, and you start just being that. And there's actually, I know of some writers who have what I would say, the early 20th century mostly, that would actually sit down and pick a masterwork and just rewrite the entire thing, like word for word. Just essentially transcribe it to their typewriter, because they were trying to find the flow of how that came to be. And then from imitation, I think you move into a space of innovation. And if you don't have those 4 steps, I think navigating the void is just absolute madness and something that people would not want to do. So it's like, if I didn't have the skill originally to do what I'm doing, then I wouldn't be able to make whatever I find while I'm curating what I'm looking for.
So now that I completely bogarted the beginning of this, that you actually, right when we sat down, said, I got some interesting things for us to talk about. And I just said, I'm going to grab this wheel for a second. I'm going to yank it right here because I was sitting here just ruminating on something.
No, that was good.
Now that I ruined your plan.
No, there's no real plan. I mean, the other thing that we can discuss that's kind of it's funny that you brought it up, because it's kind of related to this last week's musing, which was wrapped around being in the middle of anything. That point where it's like, I can't see where I started and I can't see the end. And, maybe given the recent Lord of the Rings marketing push.
I was literally just going to say, where in the journey to Mordor is the middle? Is it?
It's Fangorn Forest. That's what I always think of Fangorn Forest. Which is super nerdy, but it's like we're in the middle of this space where I if you turn around, you're going to get lost. You don't know the way back. And if you continue to trek onward, you'll get somewhere, but you don't know where you'll end up. And it's that last piece that shuts a lot of people down. It's that fear of what could be, because the way we're wired is to get those fear-based responses, the amygdala piece where it's like, I'm scanning for a tiger that's going to eat me. And our brain can't separate, making a painting that might suck and therefore not painting because you're afraid of sucking, with getting eaten by a tiger. They both feel the same way.
That's amazing. I mean, all I pictured in my mind was a giant warehouse of commercial artists whose job is to paint the paintings that go into, whatever bland corporate office is being constructed next. And there's someone with a giant tiger, with the chain, and they're just walking around up and down a thing. And it's literally utilizing our, our minds from 200,000 years ago to drive this factory of awful corporate art being pumped out. And that, I don't know, that's what popped in my head while you were.
I don't even think they'd have to do that. I think that you sit a bunch of creatives down in a room and you say, make me something. And before you leave the room, you go, oh, by the way, you might fail. And you leave. It's going to be a month of analysis.
But
And
failure acceptance is so important to things that we do, and I've never really had a hard time with failure because I'm pretty terrible at most things, and I fail and I move on. So much to the point where someone has to remind me about how I was incapable of something because I'm so good at just forgetting my own failures and just going ahead. And how do you get someone to move past the idea of this failure, that failure is bad? Because no matter how, I mean, you can scroll through LinkedIn and there are dozens of posts, hundreds of posts a day about how, it's okay to fail is a part of success, and all these axioms that everyone will put up, but the actions don't match. Much like most things in social media, the actions don't match the words. So while people put these things up, there isn't an actual culture either within themselves, like a personal culture, or a department, or even a company where actual failure is really accepted as a part of the process. And I think that breaking folks of that thinking is one of the core things I have to do. So actually, to kind of wrap that back around to Sarah, one of our recent hires, she's in the past month, she's been thrown into the deep end, really into the deep end. And, we were on the, I was going to say the phone, but it was Zoom. So Zoom is now synonymous with phone. And, she said, I feel like I suck at everything. And I said, well, you're new to all of this. If you had 10 years of media experience, yeah, honestly, I'd be saying, yeah, you kind of suck right now. And this was a mistake. But and she laughed, but that kind of honesty, I wanted her to understand that the mistakes that were being made were because she's learning things she's never done before. And she said, I feel like I'm making new, mistakes every single week. I said, yeah, but you're making new ones because you're trying new things and you're advancing yourself. You're not even making the same mistakes you made in your first week because you're learning. And that's the most important thing. And I'm not sure that for all of the palaver that goes on about supporting failure, that we actually do it, the grand we, do it nearly as much as we should.
yeah, and I think you basically laid out the case for why. I think there's that, I do believe there's a biological imperative hardwired into us to avoid danger. And if failure looks like danger, then you avoid it at all costs, no matter what it is. But I think it's related to the way that the nature of contributing to a effort greater than yourself has changed, where the emphasis is no longer on repeatability and systemic based thinking. It's now try new things and be a generalist at that, and not a specialist in this one area where you're going to work for 45 years until you retire. And
so kind of what you're saying is, instead of being really good at building a screw, you should be asking yourselves, why do we even use screws? Well, asking yourselves that. I just suggested that all of us have multiple personalities, which maybe we do. But anyways,
it's possible. Maybe it was just that was a fragment of a slip, but
that's an album right there. Yeah. Fragment of a slip.
But it's not just that. It's like there are some people that are comfortable living in the unknown, and there are people that are thrust into the unknown against their will. And the people that are trained in a sense to focus on specialization can't see that other side of the idea. So the way we've adapted to that as like a workplace culture around the world is that you have generalists in leadership and you have specialists in kind of the working area of the company where the work is actually getting done. And if you're not careful, you end up with a frustrated generalist that can't understand why he doesn't have enough specialists to get something done. And I think it's probably, I don't know if the role should be reversed, but I think that's something that we are toying with a lot, is that, you and I are starting to specialize more and more, and we want generalists around us to help us, where before we were following that same pattern of we will be the generalists and we will hire specialists. And what that ended up looking like was, a level of scale that wasn't sustainable. Even if we continue to grow and add more clients, it doesn't line up with the type of lives we want to lead. It doesn't line up with the general way the world works today.
And you end up filling the gaps where when you don't have the specialist to do the thing, you end up as the generalist leader having to then specialize to fill that gap, because there isn't a never-ending amount of resources to just keep filling those specialization gaps. So you end up having the situation where you're stuck, and either it doesn't get done or you have to do it yourself.
And I think specialists do have their place in our economy as freelancers and as autonomous workers, essentially, because that's their best bet at living the lifestyle they want to live as well.
And it's I think in many cases, from an economic standpoint, the way that they can maximize their value, right? And an organization can minimize the cost of keeping those folks on staff. Because obviously, if you have a need for specialization, but it isn't all year round or all week round or all day long, it becomes hard to keep that specialization in place. And moreover, that person is now not monetizing their skill set to the level that they possibly could. So, the distributed nature of work today, which will, even though there's still a lot of pushback from that will continue. That redistribution model. I think it's a bit like the pre-industrial revolution, where people would let out work to folks in England, and there was no main factory. Everyone did the work inside of their house. Where I think knowledge work has been and will continue to go down the route of pre-industrial England, where that centralized location does not truly provide much value, and that skill that exists can now be let out to multiple people, and you don't have companies holding all of it. Take knowledge wrapped around the utilization of AI and machine learning. There is simply not enough people in the world to fill the need at every company for that skill set. And you can make a list as long as your arm of the talents and skill sets that there aren't enough people. Well, we either make more of those talented people, which that's a pretty tall order, or we better allocate that scarce resource. I think the improved allocation of that scarce resource is completely wrapped around the distribution of those knowledge workers in a way that allows them to be brought in as needed when the time is right. Like you said, in that kind of specialist sellsword. I like sellsword better than freelance. I know they mean the same thing, but I mean probably because I'm in the middle of Game of Thrones. Both rewatching Game of Thrones and. I forget what the name of the new one is. I know it's Dragons and Blood. You know what? Okay, so you've seen it. I just got to say this, and I don't. Sophomore efforts, right? the opening to Game of Thrones is quite possibly the best opening to any show ever, in my opinion, because they've refreshed it, and I watching for the first time and even the second time I watched, I always watched it because it's so good, it's so dynamic. Instead of it's like they tried to do it again. You haven't watched the second episode, have you?
I have, yes.
Okay, so you saw the opening.
Yeah.
I mean, what happened there? I mean, maybe I'm wrong. I love your viewpoint here, because I feel like they tried to reinvent it without reinventing it, but they did in fact reinvent it, and at the same time they ended up making something that was just blah.
Yeah, well, I think so far the content of the show has been great.
No, just the opening.
Just the opening.
Just the opening.
The opening, we have this strong urge to service fans in a way nowadays that is not good.
So fandom can be a bit of an unhealthy thing for the creation of art.
Fandom perpetuated by the internet to the scale that it is, yes, because never in the history of creating anything have creators had unfettered access to so many people giving them thoughts and opinions on what they make. And it's not long before the studios pick up on that and try to just put the guardrails enough on the creativity that it hits both marks. They want it to be earth-shatteringly different, but they want it to make people feel what they felt when they first saw or heard whatever the original thing in canon is. And it's becoming a real, interesting topic in the creative community, where you just have to, at this point, for reasons of just economics alone, you have to play in that world. And it's not going to be the people that make the truly innovative work that we lionize anymore. It's the people that are able to make a piece of work that somehow ends up good, even though it had all of those restrictions.
Yeah. Is it a bit like the challenge that we run into? And I think we've very successfully dealt with it, of that perennial, do we give them what they're asking for, or do we show them something that's better? And, we know that it's very dangerous to give someone what they're asking for. But at the same time, it is something that we do need to respect and understand. We have to get inside the what of what they're asking for and deconstruct it, and then figure out how to do something that's what they're looking for, but elevated beyond that, because, we're not here to repackage and give someone back their own idea, but we do need to make sure that they have some part and some ownership over the creation process, because that's an important part of owning any creative that is being done by an outside entity.
Yeah, and I think of it like now I think of it like I'm less apt to show something completely off the beaten path of where we know that our customer wants it to go. And it's, I think, our job to make sure that what they're asking us to do lines up with the intended goal or result that they're looking for. So that's the commerce part of commercial art, is that you are working for somebody else. And so, it's different in our world because we're the hidden hand. We're we're not taking the work we do for our clients and distributing it on their behalf as JXM. We're actually a silent partner that's in between them and their consumer. So why would we want to take over the taste component on their behalf? Well, because sometimes the customer might be really good at what they do, but they're not really good at talking about what they do. So when we come on board, it's our taste in communication that I think adds to where the path that they've already set down. Very seldom do we sit down and completely change course on them or change their business without their buy-in, because I think buy-in is a great word to explain how we collaborate, since there is an exchange of dollars happening. So, back when I was younger and probably had more of a outward-facing ego, I would say they don't know what they want, and I'm going to take it from here, and it's my job to show them something that they've never seen before. But the way that communication has changed, it really is, by and large, anyone's guess once something leaves our idea room and goes out into the world as to how it's going to perform. So going back to the movie point, the creative person behind that, the director or the person with the vision, needs to understand how the medium of communication has changed, and then try to work within the confines of that. So there's so many ways to reach somebody nowadays, like in our business, that you talked about the void earlier. There's almost endless, infinite options.
Our challenge isn't what to do; it's what not to do. Not is one of our primary drivers. I know on the media end, and I'm sure it is on the creative end as well, where it's who don't we want to target? Who shouldn't get this message? Who will not act because of this message? Who will this not connect with? It's the no is really what drives performance, and it's where I think one of our greatest strengths is shaving off all of the targeting that we can until it is the appropriate target, because it's getting harder and harder to actually target who you want. So you need to do the inverse. You need to start stripping away who you don't want, and by doing that, the very nature of what you've set up will target who you want to go after. So I think it's a very similar thing to probably sculpting, and whether it's sculpting something physical or sculpting an idea. Idea generation is probably way more reductive than it is constructive, because you do construct something in the beginning, but then you edit and you edit and you strip away and you strip away and you strip away. So, I think that's probably an interesting way to look at it.
Yeah, I think of myself that way, both in experimenting with sculpture lately, but also as an art form, but also just I'm very much a sculptor when it comes to the way I look at something. So you're not going to get a fully thought out vision from me to get a project underway. What you're going to get is some talking points. And then it's our job to stare at a piece of rock or marble until something appears, and then start releasing it from that. Yeah. And, there are other people, I think, although I've never come across one, that knows exactly how to approach it. And I believe that is probably gone away, that's become extinct, that it's like, okay, you want to reach this cohort, we have a standard prescription for that, and it's this, 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 and this. Where I think we're headed is that the relationship between us and the client, or us and the brand, needs to be so well built that it doesn't really matter what the outcome of a given project together looks like. So it's more about, we don't work with new brands. Like, we don't work with startups. We never have. We've always worked with established brands that we're coming in somewhere in the middle of their journey, and we're helping them go to market in a different way, or just helping them go to market sometimes. So in that space, I think novelty matters more than, just straight up prescribing a direction. So if you put yourself in the mindset of a business owner that has been around for a while and is, struggling to bring in new business, we come along and show them something that aligns with their business goals, but maybe they haven't seen before. And it used to be that was on the technical end. In 2011, we were like the digital guys. But now that's been democratized to the point that the novelty comes from the ideas. The novelty comes from the consistency of approach.
Yeah, all the tools are just tools now. They're not. It isn't novel that you have this tool. It just exists. I mean, media and targeting is a commodity. The idea behind how it is used is not. Just like creative now is a commodity. You can get, $20 display ads on Fiverr if you want. So the thing itself is a commodity. It's the idea that isn't. And I would argue that the idea, until some sort of super intelligent AI gets created to do that idea generation for us, and then subsequently that takes over the human race and enslaves all of us, which is what it will do. Until that happens, and hopefully I'm not around for it because I don't want to fight the machines. It sounds hard. The idea is always going to be the place for the generalist and the specialist to kind of come together and say, what can we do here? What should we do here? And then ultimately, how are we going to get there?
And I think that is something I'm super... Well, of anything, I'm more excited about that because I don't know, and this is maybe I remove this from the conversation, but I don't really want to pay a writer $90,000 to be a writer for us.
Yeah.
But I will spend $1,000 90 times on writing. And I think that is more exciting to me because I love the idea of different voices and different, a variety.
And that allows that writer to try a lot of different things, experience a lot of different things, and ultimately it makes them better at what they do. And of course, yeah, there are situations where, having that staff, grinding writer makes sense. But really what matters more is the idea that they're starting with. Because without the idea and without the strategy behind that idea, the written word, I mean, it can be almost, it doesn't even matter. I mean, how much, honestly, shit content exists that is just written because someone said it needed to be written and no one asked why,
Yeah, it's so common. I mean, and that goes all the way back to what we were talking about in the space of the movies, is that in a world where we're playing to everyone's nostalgia and we're rehashing franchises and brands, and the idea even still needs to be good. And that's still hard to come by, and that's still a lot of work. Is, the question, how do we get people, well, it shouldn't be, how do we get people excited about the nature of this franchise when they were a child and get them back to watch more of it? It should be, how do we make a Top Gun movie that's better than the first one?
Yeah, and I completely agree. And what I need to do is I need to go to the bathroom right now because I drank a lot of coffee. So if we come back to this, we had more to say. If not, then we decided to leave this podcast on the idea that I had to go to the bathroom, and we really didn't have a good closing.
Going to the bathroom is a good idea.
Okay.